Welcome again to Cottage Talk. I am Russ Coleman. Joining me right now is Tony Gold. This is our post-match show of Fulham's 3-2 victory against Brentford. Fulham do the double against Brentford, which is just wonderful. And just like the entire season, it has been a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get with Fulham. Well, now you get a massive victory away from Craven Cottage. Derby, it's all good stuff, and we're going to talk about it for the next 45 minutes to an hour. This should be a lot of fun. And just want to mention before we get going, a major thank you to the guys from Fulham Boston for having me join them at Old Lagoon Saloon in Somerville on Sunday. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and I think I might have to go back again and possibly get on one of these guys to join us on Cottage Talk. That might be a lot of fun. Anyways, let's get to the show. First, I have to welcome Tony back to the show. Tony, how you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. How you doing?
I am doing well, my friend. I'm doing good. Listen, what was interesting about watching the match on Sunday, we knew that Europe was going to be difficult and probably unlikely. That's all now been taken care of. So I was a little bit relaxed, but I knew how important it would be to beat that team. And Tony, regardless of how they played, we'll talk about it. We'll break it down. We'll talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly in Cottage Talk talking points. But they got it done, and it's about the results. It's about the 3 points. Just give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I think we spoke about it, didn't we, Russ, before the game, and I think that ultimately it was just about the result. It was just about winning the game. It didn't matter how Fulham did it or didn't do it, as long as they got it done, and it didn't have to be pretty and nice. And obviously at times it wasn't, but they did what they had to do to win the game. And ultimately against them, that's all I care about, is winning that game. And we did that. And actually the way, in the manner in which we did it again, it was another sort of, pin in their balloon, really, because after what we did to them at Craven Cottage, we've also almost gone and replicated it again at their place. So
it is crazy, Tony. It's
a magical moment. And again, great result. And, no one could have predicted that at half time.
Nope.
But they found a way. And again, Marco Silva made the subs that changed the game again, Russ. And there we go.
He did, and that'll be in our Cottage Talk talking points. I do want to share this. All right, Chris, come on. You couldn't win for us? Come on, Chris. What is up with this with Liverpool? You let us down. Sorry, had to share that because that was our little glimmer of hope. Without now has gone because Liverpool lost to Brighton Hove Albion, but that's okay, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us the entire season. We really appreciate it. All right, my friend, let's get to it. I have several topics for us in Cottage Talk, talking points. Let's start with, I think, a very significant one. Okay? Obviously, Fulham are not going to be in Europe, but they did break the points record, 54 points. That is quite the achievement. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, listen, all you can do is improve on what you did the season before. And obviously Marco Silva's achieved that with one game to go, and that could go one way, or the other. But yeah, ultimately it's a hard one, Russ, because there's been so much good this season and so many, highs, but I don't know. I think that I still feel a little bit deflated. And I know that's a weird thing to say because
it is.
We had so much good to look forward to, and it's almost like it's just sort of petered out, but we've still broken our points record. So it's a bit of a weird one. So I'm not sure how I feel about that at the moment. I'm sure once the season's finished and we look back on it and say, you know what, you can't beat by beating your best position and best points, so to speak. But it's almost like a season of what should have been, really, or what could have been.
Right. Okay, so before I go on any further, that was my first talking point. Do you want to go with all the positives, or do you want to get the negative out of the way and then talk about the positives? I'm going to give
No, I
you
think
the.
we should go with the negative. I think we should go with the positives, Russ, to start with. I think
Okay,
we should. Yeah.
we'll end with the negative talking point. We will
Yeah.
end with that. Let's start with the positive because there is so much good here. So let's talk about. Well, this one's interesting. Okay, Adama Traore epitomizes Fulham's box of chocolate season in this match and in the season, Tony. The good, and listen, he was partially responsible for the first goal, but Adama Traore really just epitomizes what this season has been for Fulham. I want to talk about him because I was thinking about it, and he really is the example for what Fulham have been this season. There's been some good, there's been some bad, but overall, there's been good. So, what are your thoughts about that?
I always say, Russ, you'd rather have him playing for you than against you.
Right.
Regardless of the inconsistencies that he brings, I would always rather have him in my team than not. And look, he is what he is. You're going to get what you're going to get, and fans either have to accept that or not, as the case may be. For me, I think he's a great option. Yeah, he's inconsistent, but then you know what, Russ? You could talk about half a dozen players in our football team that are inconsistent week in, week out, and probably more actually. So look, I'd rather have him. I'm pleased he signed up for another season, and yeah, look, he's one of those players, like you say, you never know what he can bring, but when he's on it and he delivers, and he's impossible to play against. He's absolutely horrible to play against, and he has got some qualities about him. He wasn't at Barcelona. It was no fluke that he found himself at Barcelona. He was there because they saw something in him. Unfortunately, they realised that, there was only so much they were going to get out of him. But look, I think he's a great option to have, and I think we're lucky to have him.
I totally agree, Tony. What's interesting about watching Traore is exactly what you said. There have been some moments where you really see why he was at Barcelona. And then there are moments that you're thinking, okay, you know why he's no longer there. So that pretty much epitomizes it. But when you look at what he's offered Fulham about to play Manchester City, and if he scores one of the opportunities, we get something out of the Man City match. But you saw a lot of qualities throughout the season, the good and the bad. You saw him score some really good goals and really be someone that no one wants to play against. So, yes, I agree with you. I'd rather have him with Fulham than play against him. So, I get that. It's just I was looking at the season. I'm thinking, who better is an example of what Fulham have gone through this season than probably Adama Traore. But as you said, there's probably about 6 or 7 other players that go in that category as well. That's actually a good point. All right, let's move on. You've already nailed it, but we're going to talk about it now. I want to give Marco a lot of credit because when I look back to how Fulham won this match, it actually reminds me of Fulham losing at Craven Cottage against Chelsea, where Maresca changed the match at halftime and obviously with his substitutions overall. That won the match for, in my opinion, Chelsea. Well, now Marco does it against Frank. He does it again, makes a change in halftime, and then there are 2 other key substitutions that came on with Josh King and, of course, Harry Wilson. But it all starts with Tom Kearney. What are your thoughts about this? Because I think this is the difference in the match.
Yeah, for this particular match, absolutely. But I think over the course of the season, he's certainly got a lot more right than he's got wrong. I think, on the balance of things, I think he's definitely made changes that have made, affected games more positively than negatively. I think we've discussed it at length for us about Marco Silva as a tactician and obviously the defensive side of the game. And I think that's something that he needs to work on over the summer. It's an area that he needs to improve on as a manager, certainly tactically, certainly when we haven't got the ball. I don't think our shape is right at times. And he's got to find the right balance between us being able to defend our 18-yard box effectively and also inside our 18-yard box, especially from set pieces and dead ball situations, which, haven't been great this season.
Right.
And if he can adjust that and get that right, then there's no question that Fulham would have had or should have had 15 more points this season than they've already got. And that would have been the difference between us being where we are and actually still competing or being in a place for Europe next season. So if he can get that adjustment right over the summer, and that will mean bringing in better players, and that will also mean tweaking, how we set up defensively. And it's not just about the back four or back five for us. It's about us as a team, collectively, having midfield players defending as well. So if you can get that right, then obviously we will be in a much, much stronger position. But in terms of his changes this season, he's held his hands up when he's got it wrong, and he's made those changes effectively. And we've won a lot more games than we've lost or drawn.
Great. Very good stuff there, Tony. And I agree with all that. And what's interesting is that you actually previewed the negative that we'll be talking about at the end of Cottage Talk Talking Points. We'll get to that because we are going to talk about the defending as a collective unit, because that to me is the one negative that we're going to talk about in the talking points. But let's go to another positive. You're going to love this one. Let's talk about it. Harry Wilson just needs to think every opponent is Brentford. We'll just leave it at that, okay? What is it with him against Brentford? But listen, it's funny. I remember when he first came back from the injury, it was obvious he wasn't ready to go yet. He probably was rusty and needed a match, but now he's come back into it. Now you're seeing the Harry Wilson that we saw throughout the season, Tony, and he just has the knack of scoring big goals and at the biggest possible times in the biggest matches. This is a huge match for the supporters. He knew it, and he really just stood up to the challenge and made a difference. Let's talk about Harry Wilson coming on in the second half and getting the match winner.
I hope that Thomas Frank hasn't hired a hitman to take him out, Russ. Because they must be sick of the sight of Harry Wilson, let me tell you. Look, I think that when a player isn't playing regularly, hasn't got the legs or the minutes in his legs to get through games, or when they come back from a bad injury or a difficult injury, it takes time for players to get up to speed. And it's difficult when they're not playing regularly, not getting those minutes in. It's hard to get a rhythm. And I think that, I think it's taken Harry Wilson the amount of games and minutes that he's had up to the Brentford game to sort of get that sharpness back in him. When he came on the pitch, Russ, and obviously, he takes that goal. It's let's talk about the finish first of all, because
incredible.
It's an absolute sublime finish from that area. I mean, Flecken didn't even move. He did not even move. It's a great finish. And look, Harry Wilson is one of those players that's very important to the squad, because of what he can give you coming off the bench. I don't think he's a starter, Russ. I genuinely don't believe he's a starter, but he is definitely one of those players that you can look at and go, right, Harry, I need you to come on for 35 minutes. I need you to do something. I need you to change it. And he's shown that this season because he's done it. But now there's talk that he might not sign the extension, that he might be off because he wants to play more regularly. And that's something that Fulham have to find a way to balance out and deal with, because we can't afford to lose him.
No, and that's actually a good point. And if you've seen some of the comments from him after the match, you can see he really loves the club. So I hope that he stays. I hope he signs a new deal, and maybe they can just let him know the importance that he gives Fulham, that he might be able to start on occasion. But like you said, Tony, I don't see him as a regular starter, but if that's what he wants, then like you mentioned, he might not want to stay. However, I think he knows how important he is to the club, and I hope the club really shows it to him. And I hate to use a phrase from Harry Maguire. I'm sorry, Jerry Maguire. I said Harry Maguire. Jerry Maguire. Boy, there's a Goldman for you. But show me the money. Show him the money. Show him the money. Pay him a little bit more money. Maybe he'll stay. That's sometimes
he's got a good pedigree, Russ. Right? He's got good stock. I just think that with him, it's consistency, and sometimes Harry Wilson, when he starts games, he doesn't affect the game in the manner that you want him to affect the game. he seems this season, and he's shown it, and it's statistically there, that when he's come off the bench, he's had a real impact. But like any player, players want to play, Russ. They want to play football. They want to be regulars. And so he's no different to anybody else. But I guess it's down to him to show Marco Silva that if he wants to be a starter, that he can be as impactful from the start as he is when he comes off the bench.
Because I have to tell you, and I agree with all that, that him coming off the bench is just a weapon. It's a weapon. It's a valuable weapon to have. But like you said, if he wants to play regularly, then I get where he would be coming from, that maybe Fulham would not be the place for him. But we'll see what Marco and Fulham tell him. And like I said, I also think money can also be a factor. We shall see. Like you said, the players want to play. All right, let's move on. I think you're going to agree with me on this one. We got a match against Manchester City coming up. So I'm going to make the call right now. Josh King needs to start against Manchester City. Tony, we've been just talking about this for a good portion of the season. Josh King, give him a chance to play. Tony, he made a difference in a very short cameo, a little bit more than short, but he made a difference. What are your thoughts about his performance, and would you like him to start against Man City?
I would love him to start against Manchester City. I thought he was a breath of fresh air when he came on the pitch. He is integral next season, for number one, for his development, but also he's a hungry, young, very talented footballer that, Silva needs to nurture, obviously, and be careful with. But you know what? Take the reins off. Let him play. Put him in the side. Let's see. Because I promise you, Russ, right? Sasa Lukic, Smith Rowe, Pereira, Berger, Josh King would not do any worse than any of those players, right? And I believe that Josh King has actually got goals in him. And I think because he's so creative, and something that Fulham lack is this creativity. Yeah. When he came on that pitch for that time that he was on against Brentford, you just saw a hungry, young, talented player that loves football, that can be impactful. And personally, I think he's someone that we've got to encourage. And I know that they're taking their time with it. I understand that. But you know what? Arsenal have let the reins off young players, and they're playing now regularly. Look at Skelly, playing already at right back for them. He's in the team. He's playing regularly. If you're good enough, age isn't a factor. You're good enough. Let him play. He is good enough. Let him start against City, and let's see what he can do.
What's interesting, Tony, and you and I talked about this after the match, when you watch Josh King play, the one thing that we talk about with players and also with Marco, play with no fear. He plays with no fear, but he has that creativity. You could see it. He has that hunger and that creativity that when he came on, nothing against Smith Rowe, nothing against anyone else that plays that role. It was just different. It was almost infectious watching him out there. And I'm thinking, we need to see more of this. I understand the age thing. I get all that. But at some point, as you said, give the kid a chance. This is a huge match. He throws him in. He did not look in awe of the moment. He had no fear. He was playing fearless. And that to me says, start him against Man City. You have nothing to lose, Tony. Nothing to lose.
Absolutely. And look, is he going to make mistakes? Absolutely. Of course he is. But the only way he's going to learn, and the only way he's going to develop, and the only way he's going to get up to speed with the way the Premier League is by playing games and being involved in it. And the boy is so talented. He's got so much talent. People don't realize how talented this lad is. And I think that, obviously he needs players around him that can protect him. And I think we've got the players that can do that. So you know what? We haven't got a tune out of Smith Rowe this season. We haven't got a tune out of Pereira in 5 seasons. So give the kid a chance. Let him play. What Fulham have got nothing to lose. Nothing.
Nothing to lose and everything to gain, my friend. That's the way I look at it. So I'm all for that. And I hope we see that on Sunday. I would love to see him start and really get a good chunk of game time under his belt, because I think that could benefit him moving forward. So for me, I want to see him start. And honestly, I think he deserves a start. Like you said, we've been banging on the drum with Smith Rowe. I think we're going to get more out of him next season. I truly believe that. But when he came on for Smith Rowe, we saw a difference in Fulham Football Club that's undeniable. He's offering something different. Let's see it from the beginning. Let's give him a start against Man City. I think that would be fantastic. Okay, Tony, so we did talk a lot of positive. It's time for one negative, and I think it actually is something that we need to talk about because, as we discussed, Fulham are not going to be in Europe. I've wanted them to be in Europe. I'm going to be wrong. I predicted 7th, so Russ Goldman wrong again. But I would like to end the season. I want Fulham to end the season 9th. That would be great. That would still be quite the accomplishment. But I'm going to share this now because I think this is what it's about, because it will be, regardless, what if. Fulham's issue defending as a collective unit is the reason the club will not be playing in Europe next season. Tony, I think it comes down to this. I've had someone comment that you and I were just focusing on the defense and it had to do with not having a striker. Sorry, I think it has so much more to do with this. So for me, this is the real reason. This is the number one reason. We could talk about needing a replacement for Mitro. Yes, all that. We can go over that time and time again, talk about that. But if you're looking over the course of the season, I don't think it's about scoring goals. I think it's about giving up preventable goals. Preventable goals is the reason that Fulham are not in Europe, in my opinion. Am I right?
Nail on the head, Russell. Nail on the head. Look, if you want to get into the nitty gritty, okay, if you want to get into the foundations of football and break it down, Fulham have this season defensively not been good enough, right? Collectively, individually, not been good enough. There are only 3 teams, Russ, 3 teams in the Premier League that have kept less clean sheets than Fulham this season. And all of those 3 teams are being relegated to the Championship.
Yep.
Okay. It's that simple. We there are many reasons why, lack of concentration, poor decision making, individual errors, they've all contributed to why Fulham have failed to keep, more clean sheets this season and have thrown away, 28 points from winning positions. Insane. We just have not been defensively good enough. And it's as simple as that. We've had individuals who have done, Bassi as an individual has had great moments. He's done really well. But in his collective defensive partnership with Joachim Andersen, they've also been shoddy and had some really bad moments. And Joachim Andersen has been an absolute disaster this season. £30 million disaster, right? I don't care what anybody says. I'm not interested in hearing about the brilliance that he can knock a 40-yard ball and he, this and that and everything else. He has been a defensive disaster. And Marco Silva has to sort that out next season, because if he doesn't, Joachim Andersen is going to be a yard slower than he was this year. And we're going to still have the same problems that we've had centrally. And he's just not good enough for us. End of story. He's just not good enough. And, people can bury their heads in the sand and not admit it. That is a massive factor. Anthony Robinson defensively isn't good enough. He's not good enough. And so those are the areas that have been exposed this season by plenty of teams, plenty of opposition, and it's there plain to see. And I don't know what Silva is going to do to adjust that, because if we go into next season with the same back 5, we're going to have the same problems.
You and I have talked about that, and I'm not going to disagree with a lot of what you said, because there are issues there, and it's going to come down to Marco, comes down to the Cons to decide what they want to do with this defense. But also, Tony, it is defending as a collective, as you said. It's not just that back 4, it's also how they defend in general, right?
Absolutely. But what's the one thing that all the teams above us have in their back 4 us? Every single team above us has a leader, right? Has somebody that takes responsibility, that doesn't take risks, that defends and clears the ball. They rarely make individual mistakes. Every single team has got a centre half that gives them that. Bassi, unfortunately, with all the good that he brings, he needs to play alongside somebody
Yeah.
that has those abilities, like Van Dijk, for example. Obviously,
Yeah.
I'm using him as an example.
With Konate.
Exactly. Concert at Villa. You can look at it. Man City have it. Arsenal have it. All the teams have leaders. They have strong players that can defend. We lack that individual. We don't have that player, and that's something that's a player that we have to sign over the summer. We have to bring it in.
We need a Hangelin. It just comes down to
Yeah,
that. We
yeah,
need a Breda Hangelin. We don't have a Breda Hangelin. I think that's the best way to put it, right? We just don't have that player. And until you get that player, that leader back there, you can be susceptible to issues, and we're seeing that. And like you said, Bassi, I think has been great, but like you said, maybe he's just a great number 2 in a defensive pairing and a center back pairing. They need a leader back there, and it's right now it's certainly not Joachim Anderson because, as you said, he's only going to get slower, not faster, and that's not going to help us. And we need a true leader back there. So that's a good point, and that's why I wanted to bring this up because I think it's important to talk about for all the good that we're seeing, but we will be thinking, what if? And if you really ask yourself, what if, you got to look at that defense defending as a collective, and they just have not done that, given up too many preventable goals. And that's ultimately why I feel that they're not going to be in Europe this season. Great season, but it could have been better. And I think that's where you and I are going on this.
But also, Russ, I think on top of that is that we've also been playing with 2 holding midfield players.
Right. That's a good point.
And I think that
we talked about
us.
That too.
Yeah, I think that stifled us in I mean, obviously it's worked to a degree because we've got the most points that we've had in a Premier League season. But I think it's actually stifled us in many ways because, they're meant to also be there to protect your back 4 a little bit, right?
Right.
And yet we haven't had that protection because we still have failed to keep enough clean sheets, and
right.
I think that's something, again, also that Silva needs to look at in the summer. There is an argument to say, do we actually need 2 holding midfield players?
No, it's a good point. It's a good point because when you look at it, and listen, we've talked about how good that Berg and Lukic can be together. But in some ways, maybe it hurts Fulham in their creativity. I think that's where you're going on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also when we haven't had those 2 available, he's filled that hole with Pereira. And that clearly hasn't worked.
No, that hasn't worked.
I think, yes, there are certain games and certain opposition where I can understand why you would line up with 2 defensive holding midfield players. I get it.
But if you're playing Southampton, you're playing
exactly
a team like even Wolves, or that I'm watching right now. Unfortunately, Wolves is losing 4-2, which is really disappointing. Teams like that, you're thinking you need more creativity from
absolutely
from a number 8, and nothing against Sasa Lukic, and I think he wants to be more creative, but I don't think he really is that type of player. So
no,
they have decisions that they have to make. But like you said, maybe they need someone more creative in the central midfield to go along with 1 holding midfield instead of 2. That's actually a very good point to talk about the defense. Maybe that is also stifling trying to be too defensive with 2 holding midfielders, and maybe it's just not needed because it's hurting in different ways. I'm glad that you brought that up with the points total. That's a factor too. All right, Tony, let's move on. Let's talk about the starting 11. What did you make of it when you saw
it? Yeah, look, I think that no one's going to argue with it, Russ. I think that it was the right decision to start Smith Rowe. Like I said, the only shock was Sessegnon, not starting, and that was a little bit of a weird one to sort of understand because I think Wobie has been so off kilter. I thought that it would have made sense to play Traore down the right and bring and put Sessegnon on the left, and honestly, other than that, I think the rest of the team pretty much spoke for itself. So that was a little bit of an odd one to understand, but I'm sure Silva had his reasons. But with Sess being probably our most effective player in the last sort of 3 or 4 games, it sort of didn't quite understand that really.
Yeah, that was the one that really surprised me. No Sessegnon, but Sessegnon, it's funny, he didn't play that much, Tony. Did that surprise you?
Yeah, look, maybe I don't know. Maybe they were just maybe he was a bit fatigued, possibly, and they worried about maybe his hamstrings going, and they didn't want to, push him too hard. So maybe they think that it was an opportunity to just give him a rest. But for that particular game and the way and the form that obviously Cess has been in, as a fan, you'd want him to play. So
Yeah.
yeah, a bit of a strange one. And maybe also with Robinson coming back into the side and not being 100% fit, maybe he just felt that Iwobi playing down that side and whatever would give us a bit more protection and a bit more going forward. I don't know. I don't know what his reasoning was, Russ, but
Yeah.
it was a strange one.
Yeah, because I was expecting Sessegnon to start and he didn't. That was a little bit of a surprise. I get you on that. Okay. Coming up next, Tony and I are going to break down the match and we will end with man of the match. Okay, Tony, let's get to it. Let's talk about the first half. And it's funny because I had a feeling that this would be the beginning stages, a lot of going back and forth. And we saw that. We absolutely saw both teams going at it at the beginning of the match. And you could see that Brentford were going to be dangerous. I think that was pretty obvious. But I was still thinking that Fulham would get their moments. And that's going to lead us to talk about the goal. I wouldn't say it came out of nowhere, but it was a little bit of a surprise. This was a very good delivery from Adama Traore, sets up Raul on an excellent header. It's funny, they did the exact same thing minutes later, but he didn't have the power on it. I'm talking about Raul that he had on this one. This was a very good header. Let's talk about the first goal.
Yeah, look, I mean, we were causing Brentford a lot of issues down their left side. Lewis Potter was really struggling, I think, in that left back position, and we took advantage of it. And every time we sort of played down that side, we looked dangerous, we looked threatening, and it was almost like a carbon copy goal from the week before. Traore beats his man, puts a good cross in, and Raul is very dangerous and very effective in those, situations. And I've always said, if you get the ball to him in those areas, he will attack it and he'll attack it aggressively because he loves coming onto that ball, and he's a good header of the ball. So yeah, great delivery, and it was a great finish and well deserved at that time. At that time, Fulham, deserved to be in front, and you're thinking, right, we scored that goal, and we're going to grow into the game now and take it on and really develop from there.
Unfortunately, that's not what happened, Tony, because now we see again what we're talking about. What we just talked about, the Cottage Talk talking points, right? We have these issues with what I call preventable goals, and here is one of them, Tony. The equalizer for Brentford. Let's talk about this. You and I talked about this after it happened, and I will let you share your thoughts on the goal, but it actually starts, unfortunately, with the ball being with Traore and then winning the ball from Traore, and then it just takes off from there. So let's talk about Brentford's equalizer, which was, I'm going to say it, a very poor goal to give up. Both of these goals were poor goals.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're on the offensive, and then obviously, Traore gets in a bit of a muddle and ends up losing it. How many goals have we seen this season, Russ, from those situations that broken down where Fulham have just failed to defend it?
Yep.
Where I'm sorry, but I think Bassey and Anderson have to do better in that situation. They just have to, and it's so frustrating because it's just an area of our season that just hasn't been addressed. It just hasn't been addressed, and it does question what our coaches are doing with this group of players Monday to Friday at training sessions, in training situations. What are they doing to work on these situations to improve? Because I don't see any improvement, Russ. I just see the same things happening every single week. And it gets to a point where you think to yourself, are we just going to sit here and accept it? Is that just in Fulham's DNA? Is that just what we've got to accept and how we're going to, move forward? Okay, we're going to score more goals than the opposition. It doesn't matter that we can't defend. I just don't think that's good enough for us. I just don't think it is. And I think it's something that needs to be addressed.
I totally agree, Tony, because so many of these goals really are goals where you could work on it and you could really avoid happening, and this is one of them. And if we're going to talk about the next one, the next one's worse. Okay, this is bad. The next one's worse. We'll get to that in just a few minutes because I want to talk about something in between. But this is what has really disappointed me because I feel that Fulham's defense and Fulham should be able to give more to the team defensively than giving up these goals. And it just happens over and over again. I know every team has them, but other teams are better in defending these situations than Fulham are. They're just not good. Like you said, Tony, there are 3 teams that are going down, and we're with them when it comes to situations like this. And that, to me, is not where you want to be. You want to be with the best teams in the league. If you want to be where you want to be, you can't be giving up goals like this. But they are. And that's why they are in the position that they are, and they're not better than they are. I think that they should be better, but the table doesn't lie, and these goals, I think, are the reason, just like this one. All right, before we talk about the second one, I have to talk about the penalty for Brentford because this one annoyed the hell out of me, Tony. This was a pure dive, okay? I can blame Anderson for putting his hand on there, right? But the player continues to run, Tony, and then falls down and dives, Tony. How is this given? Please tell me that you agree with me on this.
I think it's fair to say that Jared Gillett had a weekend that he'll want to forget. Didn't he referee the cup final as well?
I'm not sure about that.
I think he was the referee that refereed the cup final, and he had a shocker in that game as well. I thought the referee had an absolute shocker, Russ. Number one, obviously, we're coming on to it, but Wissa shouldn't have been on the bloody pitch anyway.
Right.
But, then there's an argument to say that he should have sent Tete off as well, maybe.
Yeah.
But that was never, in my mind, that was never a penalty. Never a penalty. And obviously, we've seen them given this season, and everyone will say, well, he's done the... Sorry, the softest penalty you'll ever see in your life. Ridiculous decision. But I just thought, the refs had a shocker. Absolute shocker.
And how does VAR not overturn that, Tony? How does VAR not overturn that? Because they looked at it, right?
It's the VAR is pointless. It's absolutely pointless. I wish they'd get rid of it. I really do. It's killing the game. It's killing it. I think last night I was watching Brighton, and Brighton scored a winner, and you're waiting 3 minutes. They've celebrated, then they don't know if it's, and then it's given. No one wants that, Russ. VAR. I'd rather go back to the officials just making decisions, yes or no. And if they get it right, they get it right. If they get it wrong, they get it wrong. We all move on. It's killing. I'm done with VAR. It's a waste of time.
Okay, my friend. But let's give credit to Bern Leno. Makes the save, right? He makes the save. And then there's some controversy. Sorry, I'm an American. Controversy that he was off his line. Bull crap. It was very good by him. I don't want
the man Leno steps up again, Russ, and like I said a million times. I know he made a ricket last week for the 3rd goal at Everton, but you know what? Our man of he's up there for man of the season. Honestly, he has been fantastic this season.
He has, my friend. Very good point. Okay, I've been trying to stall, but let's talk about the second goal from Brentford because this is. We always talk about when these happen in matches. This happens before the end of the half. And at the time, I'm thinking, this is a killer when it happens. This is off of an effing long throw, Tony. There's no way they should score on this, but they do. Let's talk about it.
The truth is, Russ, you wouldn't see this on a Sunday morning, in kids or men's football. You just wouldn't. It's so bad that can happen, in a game of that magnitude at that level. If you look at it, gets worse every time you watch it back. It gets worse.
Oh, it's horrible,
right? Because you're looking at all the defenders in our box, and not one of them gets ahead. Not one has dealt with it. Not one.
Nope.
And there's Visser allowed to just jump, score, and you're thinking to yourself, from a long throw. Really, really poor goal, Russ. Really poor. But again, we've seen it at Fulham so many times this season. Goals of that magnitude being conceded, because of this ridiculous zonal marking that they're they continue to persist with, and it's just not working. It just hasn't worked all season.
No, this is bad, Tony. This is very bad. And they go into the half down 2-1. But for some reason, I'm still thinking they can turn this around, even though they gave up this goal. And I was saying to myself, he has to make changes at halftime. We were talking about this at Old Magoon's Saloon. They're like, listen, he has to make the change or changes at halftime. Well, he makes a change. So let's talk about the change. What did you make of Kearney coming on at halftime? Now, Berger didn't play well, so this made sense. What did you make of this decision?
Brilliant decision. Changed the game. Changed the game. Berger was struggling. He was having no impact. He wasn't doing his job. The game was passing him by. And it was a stroke of genius from Marco Silva to bring on Kearney at halftime and change it. It changed the dynamic. It changed the game totally. Right. Because suddenly we had a player in midfield that can get on the ball, that was comfortable on the ball, that was making the right decisions, that was playing forward, and it just changed the whole dynamic.
Completely agree with that. So you have that change, and you could see a change at the beginning of the second half. Fulham are starting to dominate the ball, dominate the play, getting more possession in their favor. But for me, that was a huge change. But two more changes, I think, really just solidified everything to what ended up being a Fulham victory. Is the changes by bringing on Harry Wilson and Josh King. When they came on, Tony, immediately I saw a spark from both of these players, and both were involved in the two goals that Fulham would score. What did you make of the decision to bring on these two players?
Yeah, well, what Kearney did is he, as I say, settled it down. It was obviously the next goal was going to be really important. And Fulham, obviously couldn't concede because that would have taken the game probably beyond their reach. But then, yeah, as you say, they took off. He took off Iwobi and Smith Rowe because, again, they had very little impact in terms of creating anything, scoring a goal. They both looked, completely done. And then, as you say, an injection of youth, hunger, desire. Harry Wilson gives you that as well, and yeah, it threw Brentford. They couldn't deal with it. The sudden change in tempo, and then obviously, 2 minutes later, Fulham are back in the game.
That's right. Let's talk about the goal from Tom Kearney. And what's interesting here, obviously, it's a cross that was deflected from Kenny Tete, but it actually starts a little bit before that with Josh King. So Josh King gets involved, and Tom Kearney scores on a header. And this is actually, and they were talking about this on the broadcast, so this was like a striker's header, the way that he flicks his head. This was actually a great goal from Tom Kearney.
Great header. Really good header. But what's more impressive, Russ, is, this is why Tom Kearney scores goals from midfield. When do you ever see Lukic or Berger making those runs into the box and getting themselves into those positions? They don't. Yeah. They don't ever do it. Kearney's taken a gamble. Some great interchange play, as you say, from Josh King being involved in that moment. All right, yeah, slight deflection, but Kearney's still got a lot of work to do, Russ. And the timing of his jump, and then to get that header and move that ball in the way he did, it's a any centre forward in the country would have been proud of that and happy with that.
Right. And now we're level. And what was great is that you saw Kearney go over to the supporters, touching the shirt, touching the badge. He was obviously just feeling the moment. It was a great moment for him and also for the supporters, as now we're at 2-2. But what's great here is that they come right back shortly after. I think it's only a couple minutes later. And you have the Brentford beater, the guy that beats Brentford. Harry Wilson comes on. They must really, like you said, they must hate him so badly with Brentford. It's funny because I actually listened to the Besotted podcast, and when they were talking about this goal, they were complaining about the defending on it. And yeah, you can complain because I think two players basically run into each other. I don't care about that. He still had to pull off just a tremendous shot that ends up being a goal, Tony. This is actually a world-class goal from Harry Wilson. This is all Harry Wilson. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've got to credit Traore as well
Yeah.
for getting the ball. But listen, the thing about Harry Wilson there is it's all instinctive. He hasn't thought about it. The opening's there. He's pulled the trigger, and as I say, it's an absolute. From 25 yards, that is one hell of a finish. If Mo Salah scores that for Liverpool, they'd be talking about it, till the cows come home. They'd be raving about it on Match of the Day and every single,
Fucking
post
didn't move,
analysis.
as you said.
But Harry Wilson scores
Yeah.
it, and it's like it's muted. No, no one talks about it. But it's a great finish, Russ. And it happened so quickly after our equaliser that I just think it absolutely stunned Brentford. They didn't know what hit them at that point. They just didn't know.
No, and I think the rest of the match, it's funny because we have the substitutions. We have Session coming on. You have Cuenca coming on, which I thought was interesting. What are your thoughts about Cuenca coming on?
Yeah, I think, look, Robinson's struggling or struggled with an injury. There's a few minutes to go. Well, I think there was, 8 minutes added time, something like that. So get him off. His job done. So Cuenca can fill in there and do it, do a job. So I didn't have any issue with that at all. Good decision.
Okay. And to be honest, Tony, I know that obviously I think it was 7 minutes of stoppage time, but Fulham got the job done. We've seen this part of Fulham too, is that at times they can actually see a match out, and I thought they did a decent job in stoppage time. There was a really good save from Leno, but this is just what Leno does. He really can step up to that moment. How did you feel Fulham saw the match out?
Yeah, listen, when that sort of injury time goes up, there's always a nervousness about it, because as we know, Fulham have always got a mistake in them somewhere, and you're thinking, can we hold out? Can we hold up? But look, fair play. They dug in. I think Brentford had run their race, to be fair. I think they were done. Yes, Leno's made a good stop. That's what he's there for. That's why he's been, so good for us this season in those moments, because most of the time he has stepped up and delivered. And yeah, look, so when that whistle goes, it's euphoric because you've gone into their backyard and you've done the double over those bus stop boys, and that's all that matters.
That's all that matters, Tony. It's funny because I'm thinking about this. We were talking about this at Old Magoon Saloon because here we are. We're talking about the season as a whole. And we'll go into more detail after the Man City match. But there are some really incredible moments, and beating Brentford twice, Tony, that has to be up there.
Yeah, listen, there's some great moments to look back on this season, and I'm sure we will at some point. But to do the double over Brentford is great because they're a good side. Whatever people say, they're a good organised side. They've got a good manager. Let's make no bones about it. And not many teams have gone there and got results this season and done that. But that's been Fulham all over. We've done the double over Newcastle. We've done the double over Forest. We've done the, and yet we've got nothing to show for it. And that's the frustrating thing about it all. We've got nothing to show for it other than 54 points at the moment, which, when you look back in over years and years and years and years to come, great, we've got 54 points, but it doesn't, you've got nothing to show for it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Like I said, I'm watching the end of the Crystal Palace match, and you know what dawns on me? Because we're going to talk about missed opportunities. How about that Wolves match at Craven Cottage? I mean, there's so many of these matches. You look at yourself, it's like, how did that happen? West Ham, how did that happen? But it adds up. It totally adds up. It's a point here, 2 points there. It all adds up. And it's kind of where we are, right? But you know what? In the end, though, there are some really magical moments, and we should also focus on them. All right. Let's end the show with man of the match. Who are you going to give man of the match to, Tony?
It's a tough one. There was some of the. I mean, Leno, I thought did very well.
Yeah, he deserves.
I thought, Bassi was okay, but I think just simply because of the way in which we got the winner and the way it was scored, I have to give it to Harry Wilson.
I was just thinking it has to be Harry Wilson. Okay. Harry Wilson is just, like I said, the player that Brentford doesn't want to see and we love to see. And he steps up in big moments. I mean, he's done this time and time again. So, well, of course, Chris is going to say Harry Wilson for Liverpool reasons, but I'm giving Harry Wilson man of the match just for that goal
Yeah,
alone.
spot on, Chris. Spot on.
Definitely for that goal. That goal is a magic goal, and he has it in him. And but as we say, listen, we want him on Fulham Football Club because he can do stuff like this. He can absolutely do that. So I agree with that. Man of the match to Harry Wilson. Okay, my friend, let's wrap up the show. Final thoughts before we go. You want to give a thought or two about the last match of the season?
Yeah, look, I think it's a home game. Fulham have got absolutely nothing to lose. I hope they make it a really fun day for everybody, that attends and goes. And we go there with absolutely nothing to lose whatsoever. I hope some of the youngsters get an opportunity, to get a bit of playing time. And just hope that the day is a really good day for everybody. And, we can look back on the season and say, you know what, we'll take it. We'll take it. I know we've got nothing to really show for it, but all in all, we're still in the Premier League, Russ. We're still fighting,
Yep.
and there's lots to work on and lots to push on for. And I think that's what's got to be the key for Marco Silva next season, is to push on and really sort of try and grab one of those European places next season.
Okay. So I'm going to share this. This is our friend Chris. Chris, if they pull this off, this would make Tony happy because it would also be a clean sheet. So he's going Fulham 1, Man City 0. I will take that every day of the week. I don't think it's likely, Chris, but I will take it. Okay. I will absolutely take it. Let's keep in mind that it's also going to be Kevin De Bruyne's last game. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this match. So it's going to be interesting, but Fulham have nothing to lose. So
do you know what? I'll take the 1-0, Russ, but I actually think it's going to be a high scoring game for some reason. I've just got a feeling.
I do too.
Like a 3-2 or 3-3. I don't know. I can just see a lot of goals on Sunday.
I do too. And I'm going to throw this into the fire for Fulham supporters, but there's a player that might be featuring for Man City that was in the mix today, and that's Rodri. Rodri might be back. That would be a kick in the teeth if Rodri's back for this match. But I saw him on the sideline. Just, I don't know if he came in, but he was there. So Rodri might be back, which doesn't make me feel good. But he hasn't played in a while, so who knows? Anyways, great show, Tony. Let's wrap this up. For Tony Gold, I'm Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk.